Arthur stood in the ballroom, gripping the velvet box that contained his late wife Eleanor's diamond necklace. This piece of jewelry was the last physical reminder of her love, and he had intended it as a wedding gift for his daughter, Clara. The ballroom shimmered, appearing like a grand chandelier caught in a storm of light, with crystal droplets casting fractured rainbows across the marble floor. The elite of Portside, dressed in tailored suits and silk gowns, buzzed with chatter, the sound of glasses clinking filling the air. Arthur cleared his throat, and the noise immediately dimmed. He stood at the head table, the weight of the box in his pocket grounding him, a tether to her, Eleanor, whose love still lingered in the diamonds. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady despite the knot of emotion in his chest, "we celebrate Clara and Marcus, my daughter, my pride." Clara, radiant in her white gown, kept her eyes fixed somewhere beyond him. "This is for you, sweetheart," Arthur said, opening the box. The necklace inside was a cascade of diamonds that captured the light like distant stars. He told her it was her mother's, and that Eleanor's love was now hers. The room responded with a collective breath of awe. As Arthur stepped toward Clara, Marcus, his new son-in-law, leaned forward. His lips curled into a disdainful smirk as he questioned, "What's this, Arthur?" "Some cheap trinket from a pawn shop." Marcus's sharp, mocking voice sliced through the sudden hush. Laughter rippled briefly from a few guests before quickly being stifled. Arthur's hand froze mid-air, the diamonds trembling. He looked at Clara, desperately waiting for her to speak, to defend the gift, to defend him. Instead, she stared down at the table, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her napkin. The silence felt crushing, and Arthur's chest tightened as if the very air had transformed into glass. Marcus waved a dismissive hand, knocking the velvet box from Arthur's grasp. It struck the table with a dull, heavy thud, the necklace spilling out, its stones glinting like tears on the cloth. "Really, Arthur?" Marcus drawled, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You could have at least sprung for something new." The laughter that followed was bolder now. Arthur's face burned, not with shame, but with a sudden, searing rage he hadn't experienced in years. He had planned for this moment to be the announcement of their major wedding gift, the Azure Residence's penthouse in the center of Portside. But Marcus's sneer and Clara's silence woke something cold and deliberate inside him. He straightened, forcing a smile that betrayed nothing. "Enjoy the evening," he said calmly. Arthur turned, ignoring the trailing whispers and the pitying glances. The marble floor echoed under his steps as he crossed the ballroom, each step heavier than the last. He pushed through the double doors, the cool night air hitting his face like a physical slap. In the car, Arthur gripped the steering wheel. The city neon signs, honking taxis, a world that didn't care, blurred past him. The necklace was not just a gift. It was Eleanor's heart. Clara's silence hurt more than Marcus's overt cruelty, and a relentless question of how he had misjudged them so badly tormented him. The lights of Portside receded as he drove toward the cottage in Hastings. The old house creaked under the weight of its memories. Inside, sitting in a worn leather armchair where Eleanor used to curl up with a book, Arthur felt the comfort of the air, which smelled of aged wood and faint coffee, a scent unchanged in 15 years. He held a photograph. Eleanor and Clara laughing in the garden, their hair tangled with sunlight. He traced the faded edge, lingering on Clara's smile. The memory of the ballroom, Marcus's sneer, and Clara's averted eyes had carved a wound Arthur knew he couldn't ignore. He opened the photo album, a stitch in the tapestry of my sacrifices. He recalled working late nights on the Zenith Tower trading floor, sacrificing sleep for deals to pay for Clara's private school, her tutors, and her dreams. He found an old Father's Day card where 10-year-old Clara had written, "You're my hero, Daddy." Arthur's chest ached as he wondered, where had that girl gone? He remembered sending a chunk of his investments to cover her college tuition, no questions asked, even though she later stopped returning his calls, her texts becoming brief and cold. She was always busy with Marcus, treating Arthur like an afterthought. But the truth became undeniable in the ballroom when she allowed Marcus to mock her mother's sacred necklace. Arthur had lost her. He stood, pacing, the floorboards groaning under his weight. He had given Clara everything, his time, heart, and future. only to be humiliated and have his love tossed aside like trash. Arthur caught his reflection in the mirror. Tired eyes, gray hair, but now alight with a new spark of resolve. They thought they could break him, but they were wrong. He decided he would fight back. Not Marcus, not even Clara would destroy what it earned and built. The office in the Zenith Tower hummed with quiet power. Arthur's glass walls framed a sharp, unyielding view of the portside skyline. He sat at his polished oak desk, surrounded by monitors flickering with numbers. The empire he'd built. Today, his focus was solely on justice. He recalled Marcus's mocking tone and Emily's deeper betrayal. Sentimentality wouldn't help him now. He slid a photo of Clara back into a drawer, shutting it firmly. Arthur picked up the phone and dialed Leo, an old friend who knew the city's financial underbelly. "Leo," Arthur said, "I need information on Marcus Hayes, his deals, his partners, his weaknesses." Leo chuckled, unsurprised, but asked if Arthur was sure. "I've never been more sure," Arthur stated, his grip tightening on the receiver. Marcus's name appeared in reports concerning risky bets on volatile markets. His ambition was indeed his vulnerability. Arthur underlined the names of Marcus's key investors, men he had known for decades who owed him favors. He realized this was his domain, and Marcus was about to learn the cost of crossing him. Arthur jotted down his plan. Map Marcus's network, find cracks, and exploit the leverage points. He allowed himself a small smile, confident that his plan, his masterpiece, would prove Marcus's arrogance wrong. Arthur gathered a file containing documents, names, and a blueprint of Marcus's world. The way to the folder was a promise. He met Ben, a private investigator, in a cramped cafe on Portside's lower side. The scent of burnt coffee and the damp chill of the street filled the booth. Ben slid a worn briefcase across the table, unlatched it, and said, "You wanted dirt on Hayes, here it is." The folder spilled out financial records, emails, and grainy photos, all marked with red ink detailing shady deals, unreported losses, and whispers of fraud. Marcus was overextended, Ben explained, confirming that one push and he's done. But as Arthur scanned the documents, a specific email line caught his eye. Marcus dismissing Clara's financial concerns, writing, "Your father's money will always bail us out." Arthur's stomach twisted, seeing Clara reduced to a pawn in Marcus's game. He realized that while Marcus's arrogance was his downfall, Clara's complicity stung worse than he had expected. That afternoon, Arthur visited their home. He entered the Azure residence's penthouse. The air inside was thick with sterile luxury, lilies, and polish. Gilded mirrors lined the cold marble floors. Clara offered a strange smile, fidgeting with a bracelet. Marcus lounged on a velvet sofa, a glass of whiskey in hand, greeting Arthur with mock warmth. Arthur cataloged every detail. Marcus's casual arrogance and his dismissive chuckle when the wedding was mentioned confirmed the truth of Ben's report. Clara was noticeably quieter, her gaze darting between the two men. Arthur kept his face neutral, but his attention snagged on a half-open drawer beside her. Inside, he glimpsed a velvet box from the wedding, Eleanor's necklace, tossed aside like forgotten trinkets. His chest tightened. Marcus rambled about a new deal, claiming Arthur wouldn't understand. "Old school finance is dead," he boasted. Arthur nodded, letting Marcus talk, knowing each word was a shovel digging Marcus's own grave. When Clara excused herself, Arthur followed her to the kitchen. He noticed the tension in her shoulders and the trembling of her hands as she fussed with the coffee maker. "Everything okay?" he asked softly, but she avoided his eyes and nodded too quickly. Back in the living room, Marcus's phone buzzed and his jaw tightened. Arthur knew Ben's report was already having an effect. In his Zenith Tower office, Arthur was prepared for battle. He opened an encrypted email draft. The attached file was a dagger. Ben's report, carefully stripped of its source, detailing Marcus's specific financial missteps. One click would send it to the inboxes of his bank's board. His finger hovered over the mouse. This was the point of no return. He thought of Clara, knowing she would be caught in the fallout, and the thought nodded at him. But she had chosen Marcus, chosen his world over Arthur's. He could not save her from herself. He clicked send. The sound was sharp in the quiet office, a silent missile aimed directly at Marcus's career. Across town, the consequences immediately unfolded. Marcus sat at his desk, papers scattered, informed that the board had called an emergency meeting. Director Vance, a gray-haired titan, tossed a printed copy of the report onto the desk. "Explain this, Hayes." Vance barked. Marcus's face flushed. He stammered, claiming, "It's nonsense. Someone's framing me." But Vance's trust was eroded by the weight of those red-marked pages. Meanwhile, in their penthouse, Clara paced, speaking sharply into the phone to Marcus. "You said everything was fine," she snapped. His clipped reply was defensive. "It is fine, Clara. Just stay out of it." She hung up, her hand shaking. Arthur knew she didn't know the email came from him, but he wondered if she would suspect. Arthur refreshed a news site. Hayes Group faces internal review. It was small, buried in the financial section, but it was a first crack in Marcus's facade. He closed his laptop, the sound final, like a door locking. Arthur met Marcus and Clara at a restaurant. This family dinner, meant to smooth things over, was a study in tension. Marcus tapped his fork rhythmically against his plate, his eyes narrowed, studying Arthur. Clara twisted her wedding ring, glancing around as if searching for an escape. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "You've been awfully quiet, Arthur. Not meddling in things that don't concern you, I hope." Arthur sipped his water, keeping his face a mask of calm. "I'm just here for dinner, Marcus," he replied evenly. Clara interjected, her voice strained. "Dad, Marcus is just stressed. Work's been tough." Marcus waved her off. "Don't make excuses for me, darling. Your father knows how the game is played." He turned back to Arthur, hardening his tone. "Or maybe he doesn't. Old dogs, new tricks, right?" Arthur deliberately said, "You're under pressure. It shows." Marcus's fork stopped midair. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. Clara reached for his arm, whispering, "Marcus, please." Shaking her off, Marcus leaned closer, demanding that Arthur spit it out if he had something to say. Arthur held his gaze, his voice steady. "Careful, Marcus. Accusations can cut both ways." The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade. Clara's face paled, and while she pleaded, "Dad, don't," her words lacked conviction. She was defending Marcus even now, and that pain fueled Arthur. "I think we're done here," Arthur said, standing. Marcus scoffed, but a flicker of unease crossed his eyes. Arthur walked out into the cool night, his mind clear. Marcus was rattled, but Clara's loyalty was a wound reopened. Arthur knew the next move had to hit harder, cut deeper. In the conference room at the Zenith Tower, Arthur stood before three of Marcus's key investors, including a silver-haired man named Sterling. The room gleamed, the polished mahogany table reflecting Manhattan's skyline. "Gentlemen," Arthur began, his voice calm, "let's talk about Marcus Hayes' latest venture." He slid a report across the table showing discrepancies, overstated profits, hidden losses, and deals teetering on collapse. He explained that Marcus was betting on borrowed time and your money's on the line. Sterling admitted Marcus was ambitious, but his tone wavered. Arthur smiled thinly, emphasizing that ambition was insufficient when the foundation was crumbling. By the time Arthur closed the folder, two investors had agreed to pull out. Sterling hesitated, then nodded, saying they would review their position, confirming Arthur's silent victory. Later that afternoon, Arthur sat in a notary's office. The notary slid a document toward him. "This transfers the Azure Residence's penthouse to a charitable trust," she confirmed. The proceeds would fund a women's shelter, as he requested. The apartment, once meant as a symbol of love, would now be their lesson. He signed with a single, deliberate stroke. He pushed away the lingering question of whether he could truly do this to Clara. She had chosen Marcus's values, and this was justice, not cruelty. Marcus's office was a war zone of scattered papers, half-empty antacid bottles, and desperation. An email glared on his screen. "Your position is terminated effective immediately." Investors had withdrawn. His hand shook as he slammed the laptop shut and hurled his phone across the room. He screamed into phone at Sterling. "You can't just pull out. The numbers don't lie. Cunningham, we're done." Marcus was convinced someone's playing me. In their penthouse, Clara's rising panic was barely masked by the clatter of dishes. When Marcus stormed in a mask of rage, she froze. "They've cut me loose," he spat. Clara's hands trembled as she asked, "You said the deal was solid? You promised we were safe." Marcus rounded on her, his eyes blazing, telling her not to start, handling it. Clara snapped, "We're drowning. Marcus, what did you do?" As he muttered about conspiracies, Clara saw him, for the first time, not as a protector, but as a liability. Arthur sat in the cottage in Hastings, an old armchair creaking. A news alert flashed. Hayes' group collapses amid investor exodus. Marcus's empire was in ruins, exactly as planned. Yet, the victory felt sharp because it cut both ways. Clara was hurting and part of him ached. He closed the tablet. He knew Marcus's fall was only the beginning. Clara still clung to him, blind to the full truth. The morning was gray. Arthur stood in his office, finalizing the delivery of a crucial letter. "Make sure the letter reaches Clara Hayes by noon," he instructed the courier, stressing the urgency. This notarized document, sealed with a wax stamp, was his final gift. Not the apartment, but a lesson in consequences. The apartment's proceeds were now funding a shelter in Eleanor's name. In the penthouse, Clara, her hair pulled back and her eyes tired, answered the door. The envelope's weight surprised her. She tore it open. The letter was stark and formal. The apartment, her dream home, had been sold, and the funds were donated to charity. "No!" she whispered, sinking onto a chair. She called Marcus, her voice shaking. "Dad sold the apartment," she choked out. "It's gone, Marcus, all of it." Marcus, surrounded by half-packed boxes, sneered. "Your father, always pulling strings." But his bravado was thin. Clara clutched the letter, her eyes burning. "This is your fault," she said, fierce and low. "You push him too far." When Marcus turned away, silent, Clara felt the ground shift. Their status, their future, was slipping away. Staring at her father's sharp signature, the realization struck her. She had ignored his love and dismissed his sacrifices, and now she was paying the price. Arthur received a news alert. Hayes' couple faces eviction amid financial ruin. The words were final, but they didn't bring the expected joy. The cottage in Hastings stood quiet under the weight of dusk. The doorbell rang, sharp and unwelcome. Arthur knew who it was. Marcus and Clara stood on the stoop, gaunt, their clothes rumpled. "Arthur," Marcus began, his voice stripped of its swagger. "We need to talk." Clara clutched his arm, her eyes red and streaked with tears. Arthur let them in, his expression unreadable. "We've lost everything," Marcus stated, clenching his hands. He tried a weak smile. "You've got the means, Arthur. Help us, please." His plea still carried a trace of entitlement. Arthur leaned against the armchair, silent, his arms crossed. Clara stepped forward, sinking to her knees, her hands trembling. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she wept. "I didn't mean for this. I should have stood up for you, for Mom's necklace. Please don't turn us away." Her sobs echoed. Arthur saw the little girl who once clung to him, but he also saw the woman who had chosen Marcus's world. "You made your choices, both of you," Arthur stated, his voice steady and cold. Marcus mocked what mattered most. "You, Clara, stood by and let him." Marcus tried to interrupt, but Arthur raised a hand. "No more excuses. You built this ruin, live in it." The words were final. Arthur opened the door, letting the cool night air rush in. Marcus, defeated, guided Clara out. She looked back, pleading, but Arthur held firm. He stood alone, realizing he had torn down their world just as they tried to tear down his. Justice had been served, but the cost was real. The sun sliced through the glass walls of Arthur's office in the Zenith Tower. He sat with his lawyer, signing documents. "This establishes the Eleanor Wilson Foundation," the lawyer confirmed. His substantial donation of millions would fund shelters and scholarships for years, honoring Eleanor's love and strength, a legacy untouched by Marcus's greed or Clara's betrayal. The lawyer told him Eleanor would be proud, and Arthur felt a lump in his throat. He glanced at the old photo of Eleanor and Clara, then slipped it into his pocket, a final promise to carry Eleanor with him as a light, not a burden. Arthur's phone buzzed with the Foundation's confirmation. He felt unmed, free for the first time in months. As he gathered his coat, his fingers brushed against an unopened envelope in his pocket. A letter from Clara, delivered days ago. He had not read it. Her apologies couldn't undo the past. He left the office, the envelope still tucked away, knowing he had one last truth to face. The cemetery was a quiet sea of stone. Arthur knelt before Eleanor's grave, tracing her name. He held a replica of her necklace, which he had made after the wedding. "Margaret," he whispered softly, "I did it. I protected what we had." He had fought for what was right. Arthur set the necklace replica on the grave, the simple act freeing him from the pain and the need for vengeance. He straightened, his hand brushing the unopened letter from Clara. He didn't need her words to know the truth. He tucked the letter back, a silent refusal to let her pain tether him again. Arthur walked down the path, the crunch of gravel a steady rhythm. He felt lighter. Justice had been served with purpose. Eleanor's love lived on in the Foundation and in him. The sky was clearing. He stepped into the world beyond, his heart finally at peace.